that's going to be a big part of it too, Ryan. So before we move on to our predictions, Ryan, I do want to wish a happy birthday to our guy, Tommy Guns. Tommy Guns 44. It's his birthday. So Tommy actually put a super chat up because he wanted to see if we can sing to him. I love you, buddy, but not that much. So I'm sorry, Tommy.
Tommy, I will do one better for you, Tommy. My daughter is now, I don't know, I guess it's a daycare thing, but Juliet is singing happy birthday to everyone, even when it's not their birthday right now. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to do this for you, sir, because you're a valued member of this
He is
community.
An OG of Irish Breakdown. He is an OG.
Tommy, you're an OG even before me, sir. So I will promise you that at some point over the weekend, there will be a message on the board or a post on the message board, boards@irishbreakdown.com, by the way, from Juliet singing happy birthday to Tommy. Guaranteed.
Yes. And the video that you did with for Rita with Juliet was still like made my wife cry. So she's very good at those. Very good at those. So Ryan, let's dive into the prediction of Notre Dame and Stanford. We are going to talk about how we're going to give our score prediction, how we see the game playing out, and then hand out our game balls as we kind of put a bow on this part of the show. So I'll let you start, Mr. Roberts. What is your prediction? How do you see the game playing out, and then I'll ask you about the game balls after you're done with those things. So let's get it started, baby. Let's do it.
I mean, there should be no surprise to this prediction, right? I've talked about it all week. There's no reason that Notre Dame, this can't be the game where you finally say, hey, you were much better than a football team. You dominated from start to finish, and you made a little bit of a statement, right? So I have Notre Dame 42-17. Brian, I think that Notre Dame's going to jump on them early, and they're just going to kind of control the pace of the football game for the majority, right? I still think that there will be a couple touchdowns scored because at the end of the day, there are talented offensive players on Stanford's side, right? We've talked about Elijah Higgins. We talked about Michael Wilson. We've talked about Ben Urisak. Obviously, Tanner McKee is a very talented quarterback, so they're going to get a couple, man. But for me, Notre Dame dominates this one start to finish, 42-17. This one's a no doubter. Like, this isn't one where you score a couple touchdowns in the fourth quarter to really distance it. Like, this one is one, I believe, where Notre Dame is just dominant from start to finish, put the finishing touches, and then you go into next week feeling great about yourself.
I mean, they got to be due for, right? I mean, that's just kind of how these things normally go, right? I mean, they've got to be due for that kind of game. I mean, even teams that I'm trying to think, like, was it Notre Dame 2003? This is the game I kind of compared it. This game I compared it to is, in 2003, Notre Dame finished 5-7, but they were 4-6 at the time when they headed out to play Stanford, who was, again, also not very good that year. Finished 4-7 under Buddy Tevens, and Notre Dame beat them 57-7. Right? Even bad teams have those days where just, okay, this is the day that it clicked for us. And so, Ryan, I'm with you. I think that's how it's going to go as well. I went 52-13, and now I said in my prediction that's not the margin that I think these teams are. And so there's a lot of factors of why I went 52-13, which is a huge blowout prediction. Like, that's the kind of prediction you make when they're playing like Bowling Green or New Mexico or something like that. But here's why I went there. This is a bad matchup for Stanford. And that's a part of football. It's a bad matchup for Stanford. It's an offense. Like, we've seen this defensive line and what they do to bad offensive lines before, and it's not pretty. And those teams had mobile quarterbacks. This one doesn't. I think that on the other side of the ball, Notre Dame matches up very well against Stanford. And I just kind of see it being a game where Notre Dame jumps up early, like you said. We actually see this game very similarly. We both have Stanford scoring 3 times. You just have it being 2 touchdowns and a field goal. I have it being a touchdown and 2 field goals, right? So we're very similar there. I just think it's one of those games, Ryan, where Notre Dame kind of pours it on after they get up and Stanford just kind of wilts, because we've seen this from Stanford, right? We saw this last year where, they compete for a while, but then they just wear down. And this is a team that's beat up. They're injured. They've played 4 hard games in a row. They're traveling across country from West Coast to, Eastern Standard Time, now the very edge of Eastern Standard Time, but, going across 3 time zones. And it's a bad matchup. And so I just think it's going to kind of steamroll a little bit more than you would normally predict based on the on-paper matchup. That's kind of where I'm coming from. And I see the backup offense kind of punching one in late is kind of how I see this game going out. So I really don't see it a whole lot different than you. 45-13 with the backup offense punching one in at the end is kind of how I see it. So I do
Love it.
think this is a game that Notre Dame should dominate. It's a game that I think that when you look at it, Ryan, it's a game, like Coleman Smith and I are on absolutely the same page, and it's a game that you should control. And if Notre Dame can't control this one, then we're going to have a very interesting, concerning conversation after the show. But I think they do. And you know who I think is going to have a really big game, or a game where I'm like, okay, now this is what I thought we were going to be. I just have a feeling that this is going to be one of those games where, like, okay, this is what we expected to see a Tommy Rees-led offense look like. This is what we thought we were going to see at the beginning of the season. And I think that's part of it too is, I think Coach Rees has caught a lot of flack, rightfully so, justifiable flack, I should say. I kind of, he's a competitive dude, right? I mean, he is. And I just kind of feel like this is that game where you're going to see this offense come out, have a really good game plan, a really aggressive game plan. They're going to put Stanford away. And I just don't see it being a really competitive game at all. And so, I mean, look, they beat Stanford 45-14 last year at Stanford. And I don't think Notre Dame even really played that well that game, to be completely honest with you. They just out-talented Stanford. And I see the same thing happening in this game as well.
I love it. Was that a game ball being thrown to Tommy Rees? That's what
no,
it sounded like
no.
Right?
Game balls go to players. Game balls go to players. But speaking of, Ryan, let's do our game balls. Who, offense and defense, who do you have the game balls going to if the game plays out the way that you think it's going to play out?
I think it's Drew Pine this week for offense. Last week I gave it to Lorenzo. That did not turn out too great in that prediction. I think that what you have seen now from Drew Pine for back-to-back weeks has given you a lot of confidence that he's going to continue to grow, continue to get better. And if Notre Dame's going to score 42 points, I think that they are going to open it up a little bit more than usual, right? Like, I know Notre Dame's going to be able to run the football in this contest, but you want to continue to see the evolution of the passing game, getting wide receivers more involved, continuing to do the Michael Mayer things that have made you successful, continuing to use the running backs when you want to in the passing game as well. So I think Drew Pine has a big game offensively. That's what the first game ball is going to go to. Second game ball, Brian, you're going to love this one. I think that this is, because we've seen him now start a couple times in recent weeks, but I think this is the Benjamin Morrison game, sir. A couple interceptions for the freshman. Maybe he takes one back to the house. I don't know yet, but regardless, we've seen Stanford be a turnover-prone team. Benjamin Morrison with a couple interceptions in this one.
I'd love to see that. I mean, obviously, I think he's a heck of a player. I honestly – I'm going to give my game balls, and then I'm going to talk about how if I'm close to being right on the game ball, then it could end up with you being right. So offensively, I'm going to go with Chris Tyree. We talked during a show yesterday during the keys of the game that Notre Dame has a speed advantage. So I just kind of am picking a guy that has speed. I think they're going to rip off some big runs in this game. I could have easily gone with Lorenzo Styles or Braden Lindsey, but I went with Chris Tyree because I think this is the game where they hit one. I've seen several running backs be this close to ripping off long runs against Stanford's defense. And, like the kid from Washington who was at Virginia last year, he's a 4.7, 4.6 guy, right? I mean, Chris Tyree is going to have some big holes to run through. I think that we're going to see him catch a big pass for a big gain, something. I think Chris Tyree is going to have some big time plays in this game. So I'm going with him. And then defensively, I'm going with Isaiah Foskey. I think Foskey's going to have a Jerry Tillery type of game. Somebody said this the other day in one of the chats, and it really stuck with me. And it's like, yeah, you know what? I could see this. And if you remember correctly, in 2018, in that matchup of two top 10 teams, Jerry Tillery had something like 4 sacks in that game.
That's what propelled him to first round status,
right?
Brian. That was that game.
Exactly. And he did it against Nate Herbig. I mean, he had a couple of them against Nate Herbig, who at the time was still considered a big time prospect. It's before he just had completely had his ability. You remember how good he was during his career before all the injuries set in for Stanford? He was so good before all the injuries took over. It's really unfortunate because I enjoyed actually watching him play.
He's actually Nate Herbig's turned himself into a pretty solid contributor for the Eagles, though. He's kind of a rotational player, so
that's good. Yeah. That's good. So I see it being Foskey, but if Foskey doesn't win the game ball, but he's very disruptive, then that means the game ball is going to go to some DB that takes advantage of the pressure. And I could have easily, like, if we're doing runners up for game balls, as I said, pick Styles or Lindsey, one of the two burner receivers. I think this is the game. I hope And this could be more wishful thinking on my part than anything, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of feel like, look, Tommy Rees is a smart guy. He's a smart guy. He has to understand that they can't be this team for the rest of the way, right? Like they can't be this team that just like to beat Clemson and USC. I don't think he thinks that. I hope he doesn't think that. It would surprise me if he thought that. And I think he understands we got to get our receivers involved. And this is a great game for it. Like, this is the game for it. This next 2 weeks before you go into Syracuse, because here's the deal, Ryan. If your receivers don't have some momentum going into Syracuse, that's probably not going to be the game where they break out. You know what I mean? Against that secondary. So you got a couple weeks to really get them rolling. This is the perfect matchup for them. Jet sweeps, reverses to Braden, screens, crosses, climbs, post routes, double moves, stuff like that, where you're getting them on the run and getting them opportunities in isolations. I think he's going to do that. I think that's going to roll. I think the run game is going to look good early, which is then going to set up even more because Stanford's got to start triggering their safeties more. So I could pick one of those 2 speedy receivers. And then my second runner-up for defense was Jason Adamiola. And I could, those 2 just really having a big game. And if that's true and they both play really well, then I could see a situation kind of like Wisconsin last year where, Cam Hart steps in front of a couple, balls and gets a couple picks. And, and like you said, Benjamin could be one where he even steps in front of one and, maybe takes it back a little bit. So that would be fun to see. That'd be really fun to see, Ryan. I would enjoy that thoroughly.
I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind it also being maybe a Brandon Joseph real breakout, right? Because we've seen some moments, like he had a forced fumble last week, he had a great game week 1, but he's been pretty quiet the last 4 games, right? So if Notre Dame can get a big performance out of Brandon Joseph, maybe he's the guy that steps in front of one. Maybe he's the guy that forces another fumble near the line of scrimmage and it goes back for a touchdown, or it just go, you flip the opposition there. I think that it could be a big game for Brandon Joseph. Regardless, though, I think one thing that you said is that I feel like someone in the secondary is going to get a big boost from the pass rush, right? Like, I think that there's going to be a couple opportunities to create big plays because we've talked about it a ton. Tanner McKee is not a very mobile quarterback. He's going to get forced into some bad mistakes if there's pressure, and their offensive line is hurting with injuries right now, and it wasn't playing that great even when it wasn't. So I think pass rush is also going to have a big day. I just think that there's going to be somebody in the secondary that has this humongous game because Tanner McKee is forced into a lot of mistakes.
Yep. That's how I see it playing out. I think this is going to be a convincing win for Notre Dame. So we're going to get into the other Week 7 big game predictions next. If you're listening via podcast, you can find those on the CFB Nation channel. So make sure that you are subscribed to the CFB Nation channel, where you can get Ryan and I's predictions for a preview and predict for this week's big games. We will also do a mailbag. We've already got a bunch of them starred. Some of them are predictions, like John Kristofic having Notre Dame 34-17. We brought up a lot of other ones. Kirk Roberts, Notre Dame 45-17. So we have a lot of those as well, but we also have some questions. We're going to answer a bunch of those afterwards. There's some recruiting questions, a lot of stuff going on there. Also, if you're listening to this podcast and the game, it's not Saturday yet. If you're in town, either for the game or you live in town, you're going to want to be on campus over by the Golden Dome around 3 to 3:15 on Saturday, because we are going to go live. Irish Breakdown is going to go live at 3:30. We're going to have a big special announcement. We're going to have some special guests. It's going to be a really, really, really fun day, and you're not going to want to miss the live show, and you're not going to want to miss being there if you're able to. I promise you, you're going to want to be there for that. So if you have any questions about it, hit me up on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, obviously Coach D178, but you can hit me up, or if you're a member of the Irish Breakdown message boards, I'm going to put some stuff on the message boards about that. You can also send me DM, and you can also email me at brian@irishbreakdown.com. So I try to make my email as easy as possible for people to get to. So that's obviously that one. But got a lot going on. It's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely check that out. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this podcast.